Metal Gear Survive is a survival game developed by Konami Digital Entertainment released in 2018. It is the spin-off of Metal Gear Solid 5 and the first Metal Gear game released after Kojima left Konami. A lot of people haven't played this because of the Kojima controversy leading to poor sales. It also got terrible reviews, which is why I've never touched it. I adored MGS5, I always wanted to try this to see if it's really that bad. So does it live up to Metal Gear's high standards? Let's find out. You play as a random soldier from Mother Base dubbed the Captain, just after the assault at the end of Ground Zeroes. A wormhole opens up and sucks soldiers into an alternate dimension full of wanderers, basically zombies with big crystals sticking out of their heads. Your goal is to find a way home and most importantly, survive. Metal Gear Survive. If you're thinking, wow, that sounds nothing like a Metal Gear plot, well, you're not fucking wrong. It's baffling this is what they went for. You think they would have come up with something better to prove they didn't need Kojima, and they were just like, nah, let's just do zombies. It has very little connection to the MGS series outside the first few cutscenes. Sahelanthropus and Walking Gear show up, and the zombies were created because of nanomachines, because of course they were. But other than that, I don't see why it had to be a Metal Gear game. It has a very serious tone and wants you to take it very seriously. It's a shame it isn't very well written then. The missions aren't very good. It's mostly an AI you find telling you to go somewhere, find a thing, sometimes defend a thing, and come back. The Captain is a silent protagonist, so lacks a personality. The same can be said for the handful of characters you meet. They're all one note and lacking depth. Like the AI has this recurring bit where they get phrases wrong, but that's it. Otherwise they just talk exposition at you. This isn't helped by what I think is supposed to be a callback to the Codex. Cutscenes are a lot of time just pictures of who's talking and text next to them. This makes the game feel cheap in my opinion, especially compared to the other MGS games, at least when you're in the codec. The characters' pictures would move when they spoke, or you could just interact in some way. The story tries to take twists and turns, but the characters aren't interested enough for me to care, leading to me being very unengaged throughout. The best world building and characters can be found on cassette tapes which can be listened to whilst playing, which is nice, but there are not very many of them. So the story is basically poo. Is the gameplay any better? The game is built off of MGS5. On a technical standpoint, it plays well. You can do all the basic stuff you could do in that game, like running, shooting, going prone, and sucking up things with the Fulton system. Stealth is basically the same at its core, but it's lacking challenge and depth compared to MGS5. There's not many stealth items for you to mess around with, and there is a compass around your character telling you where close enemies are. Disappointing as Metal Gear is known for its stealth, but Survive obviously has a focus on survival mechanics. You have to deal with hunger, thirst, oxygen and stamina meters. All are very tedious. They are engaging in the sense that you have to keep watching them constantly. They all drain very fast. You're going to have to be eating and drinking what feels like every 5 minutes if you want to survive. If you're hungry or thirsty, your stamina won't last as long, so you can't sprint or attack very often. You will also stop dead in your tracks when you run out of stamina. It's a shame then that everything uses stamina besides jogging. This meant I would just jog everywhere. A sprint would only last like 3 seconds, so it would just be pointless. What also doesn't help is scavenging. You're going to want to pick up everything you can so you can craft better items. The problem is you can't carry very much, and the closer to your weight limit you get, the faster stamina drains, so the slower you become. It's a very frustrating loop. It really hampered the enjoyment I was having with the game. If the meters just drained twice as slower, I think that would have helped immensely. You have to go out your way early on to find food and water. You have to hunt down animals or a water source. You then have to go back to base to cook the food or boil the water unless you want to get an infection from the raw meat and dirty water. You can't do this when you're out and about. You can't even boil water until a few hours into the game because this trained soldier can't figure out how to put a pot over a fire. This means you're going to have to take food and water out with you on a mission, adding to your weight problem. The crafting works well enough. You just go to the workbench and make what you want. Resources are very scarce at the beginning of the game, but nothing takes too many resources to make, unless you want to strengthen weapons and armor. This takes a lot of materials to get to the max. You also have to build a base. The mechanics work well. You get an overhead view and can build stuff on a square grid. It's a bit like The Sims, but there's not that much to make. It's mainly used for making defenses. At certain story moments, your base will get attacked, and you must defend it. The problem is the game wants you to place all your defenses before the mission starts, so you don't know which direction the enemies are coming from, so I would normally have to reload and move the stuff around. The last base defense mission annoyed the shit out of me. The game is like, make sure you're ready, this is going to be the biggest horde yet, so I spent a bit of time making sure my base was ready. Then you spend the entire mission outside of your base and the game spawns stuff like turrets and fences for you. It's very misleading. Base defense is way easier than defending an area when you're out in the world, which happens a lot. You're going to have to do this if you want to unlock new fast travel points. Some of these, especially during the main missions, don't feel like they're made for single player. There's just so many enemies for you to deal with. The main thing I replaced are metal chain link fences. These are OP. Wooden fences were a waste of time. I could thrust my spear through the metal fences without taking damage and take out lots of enemies at one time. A big issue is your carrying capacity. It's extremely small. You can only carry 6 of one fence type at a time, meaning you're going to have to carry weaker fences if you want to cover all the entry points. You can also make turrets which are awesome for taking out the horde, but the ammo capacity is laughable for the amount of enemies you will have to be taken on. Plus you can only carry 2 turrets, that's it. It's not something you can rely on. These missions often felt like I only just managed to scrape by. You cannot take many hits at all, and if you do get hit, you're more than likely going to have an injury, which you have to treat with an item or have to suffer a debuff like having blood dripping on the screen. The captain moves incredibly slow when swinging or getting ready in his weapon, meaning mean you're probably going to get hit. You can increase stuff like speed and health with points you collect off enemies, but the prices increase every time you buy one and they get a bit too hefty too fast. I feel like you would have to grind to get all the skills. I didn't have half by the time I beat the campaign. As I mentioned earlier, you can't carry lots of stuff, so there's a big focus on melee combat. It's just not very good. The engine clearly wasn't made for it. It's clunky. I found it hard to judge the distance between me and the enemy, so when I used my spear, I would often just jab the air. Your indicator does turn red when you are close enough to land a hit, but if you wait for this to happen, the enemy is more likely going to hit you first. You can get 4 different types of weapons: one-handed, two-handed, spears and heavy. I mostly stuck to the spear and switched to two-handed when I had to deal with crowds. One-handed were just too weak for me, and heavies were just way too slow. MGS has always had good gunplay, especially in the Phantom Pain. This game should have stuck to that in my opinion. I was having a bit of fun with my first few hours of the game. I was enjoying sneaking around exploring the area. It was nothing spectacular, but I thought people are being a bit too harsh with this game. Then it introduced new enemy types, and by god there isn't a single good one. The first one they introduced is what I'm going to call Bruce Lee zombies. They're fast, jump around the place and kung fu on you. They're very hard to hit as they dodge away a lot. Then there's these flying mosquito enemies which fly above you and shoot you, which is irritating as fuck as they normally come as a group. They're hard to hit with melee, so you're going to be forced to shoot them, but this will attract more enemies and you can't carry many bullets. The next enemy are these big fuckers who have mortars and guns. They can shoot you from so far away. They also block attacks and have lots of health, so that's fun. Then there's these creepers. They have a fat head which explodes when they get near you. Their weak points are their legs. If you hit them anywhere else, it basically does no damage. Lastly, the most annoying enemy are these bugs that hide on the ground, and when you go near them it traps you until you break free. They always show up in groups, so if one gets you they all get alerted. Every enemy type pisses me off in different ways. None of them were fun to fight. You can try sneaking around them, but that's just going to drain your stamina. It's like the developers are trying to torture the player. The game reuses a lot of assets for MGS5. The 2 areas in the game are the same ones from the Phantom Pain. They look nice during the day, but you'll mostly be in the fog, which looks grey. It cuts off the skybox and visibility is limited. It's not very visually appealing to me. Fog covers most of the map. Oxygen will drain when in here. I'm not a fan of it. The cool part is sometimes the Lord of the Fog will be walking around in it. The Lord is a big bloodborne looking monster who can show up at random. This was the coolest moment in the game for me because you can't see him come in because of the fog, and I really wasn't expecting it. Probably because it's really out of place for a Metal Gear game. He doesn't really do much. He can step on you, but that's about it. 2 incredibly frustrating things about this game are the always online aspect and the microtransactions. If you disconnect for even a second, you will be booted to the main menu and progress is lost. This happened to me after a long defense mission. I was fucking fuming. You only save when you're at the base camps, so I got paranoid and would go back to base often. The microtransactions are ridiculous. It's not pay to win, just greedy. You have to pay to have another save slot, and you have this thing where you can send teams out on missions like in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. You only get one team, you have to buy the other teams with real money, and it's expensive as well. This is outrageous. So overall, I get the hate for this game. I think people are a bit harsh. It's not completely shit, just kinda shit. The good parts of this game are basically ripped for MGS5, and all the other stuff just isn't good. It works, it's just incredibly frustrating and tedious. It's also insulting to Metal Gear's legacy, so let's rank it. To the surprise of no one, this is going to be dead last. You watched the video, I feel like I don't have to justify this much. I actually had some fun with Suicide Squad, even though I didn't think a lot of that game either. Survive feels like it should be played in prisons to rehabilitate prisoners. I got a feeling this is going to be at the bottom of the list for a while. Well, that's it, I'm going to go do literally anything else than play this game.